Whoop, my hand slipped. How's it going? Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another watch talk show. What's going on? Today, I want to talk about Rolex and high horology. Is Rolex high horology? What do we think of it? Let's have that discussion. I think that it depends on who you're talking to, doesn't it? I think that in today's watch world, we have an understanding that there is a little bit of variation in what's considered high horology. I think it really depends on different people's levels and where they're at. Let's be a little open-minded on the subject. For example, if you're someone who is just a fan of plain, simple, inexpensive little Casios and just regular familiar watches, that are under $100 or something like that, let's just say you're familiar with these. And these are watches that you like to buy and wear. I think most of us were in that category at some point. I think if you wear these kinds of watches, then I think even the first tier up of luxury watches would be considered high horology, even a Tudor or a Breitling from that standpoint. You see what I mean? So I think it really depends on your own collection, your own experiences, where what level of horology you're at and what's high horology to you, right? Doesn't that kind of make sense? So the farther you go up the spectrum of watches and the longer you've been involved in watch collecting and such, then I think high horology gets higher. The level of horology for your own self gets higher and higher as your experience gains, as your collection grows, as you mold your own ways and thinkings. Does that make sense? So in the beginning, when you're 12 years old, and my son is wearing his Casio olive drab electronic world timer watch that I got him. To him, that's high horology, But certainly to him, Rolex is high horology. To my 10-year-old, right? Rolex is definitely high horology to him. And when he aspires and can afford to purchase his first Rolex watch, he's going to feel he's in that high horology category now, like all of us did. And as he introduces himself into the watch community, I don't know if that's such a great idea or not, to be honest. But if he ever introduces himself into the watch community or learns of watches, and as time goes on and his mind expands into the world of watches and what's available out there, and he might be thinking about getting his second watch or third or fourth, he'll probably get a Rolex the second time, the third time, like most of us all did, because we love it so much. But at some point, he'll understand that that maybe there is a higher horology now. So I think that higher horology comes with the maturity of your collecting. I mean, Rolex has never really, from the standpoint of Rolex and their manufacturing, Rolex has never really tried to be a high horology manufacturer. Now, have they? Have they? Um, I don't think they've tried to be. They've never claimed to be. They've never tried to be. Uh, as a matter of fact, you know, their Rolex is renowned for what? For making robust, reliable watches that are made to very high quality standards, but not to high finishing standards. So they're very clear in their definition of what they're manufacturing and what they're giving to you. I mean, they pretty much say that, right? Um, with the point of not providing high finishing standards. You know, they have Rolex has extremely high quality product. Let me say product quality. Rolex has extremely high product quality, which which what's so successful about Rolex in that providing of quality product quality is that, excuse me, it's consistent. The product quality that is provided, it's consistent. It extends over a prolonged period of time such that everyone knows of it to be high product quality. Everybody has come to know Rolex to be nothing less than high product quality. As a matter of fact, they've set the standard so high for themselves that they can't blunder. They can't ever fall nor make a mistake, or it will come back to really bite them in the butt. Right? Have you ever noticed when you go into a Rolex boutique, a strictly Rolex only boutique, that for the most part, the sales rep does not engage in a plethora of conversation with you? They keep it very limited, very professional, and very cordial because they're told to do so because they're representing the brand. And they don't want anybody to speak, give any personal opinions about a football game, about a political subject. You don't want to have anything associated with Rolex when you walk out of that Rolex store, be it positive or negative. It just needs to be Rolex. Have you ever noticed that? I think it's very important for them to keep that level of customer interaction at that way. The only negative is that you absolutely lose all of the personal touch, because there absolutely is no personal touch when you go to a Rolex store. Maybe when you go to an AD like Ben Bridge or whatever, you know, places there are. But when it just specifically Rolex branded store only, like you don't even know who is the owner of the store because it just says Rolex. I think they really hold themselves up to a much stricter regard. What's up there, Flippin' Zippo? How you doing? Um, and then another thing when it comes to Rolex, they don't enter any of these competitions like the the GPHG. That's what it's called. That just took place. They don't enter these competitions. They would only have to lose, nothing to gain. Um, and it comes back to what I just mentioned a minute ago about Rolex being uh, the top in quality, in regard, and not having any negative stigma associated with it. And not coming in first place in a competition would be a negative stigma associated with Rolex. They don't want to come in second to none. And it's virtually impossible to come in first place every time, right? Especially when you're not a maker of unusual complications. Then good luck coming in first place at the GPHG ever. So, to their point, what what's the point in even partaking in that event or such an event? It doesn't make sense, does it? Um, so so I think that all bodes well for Rolex. Everything that I've said so far, we haven't said anything on the negative. Um, are Rolex watches expensive? Yes. Are they expensive in terms of high horology? Certainly not. So that's something we can talk about a little bit further to extend the conversation on high horology and Rolex. Does does one have to associate higher costs with higher horology? No, I wouldn't think so. Um, but there is a correlation for sure, and it's not a correlation that's there just to make it more expensive because it's higher horology. The correlation is directly associated with parts and labor. So so yeah, high horology tends to cost more money, usually a considerable amount of more money, because one will steer towards parts that will um, profess a luxurious finish, a highly regarded horological finish. So the parts are naturally going to cost more. Plus, if the parts are genuinely made by a third party, not in house, well, then there's going to be an additional cost upon that. And in addition, you'll need more skilled workers to engage with those parts, without a doubt. You don't want to have unskilled workers working with higher quality parts. They would probably tend to not um, put a nicest finish on there as a more skilled worker. And you know how watch people are. They criticize everything, right? They're going to pull out that horological scope and really zoom in on the finish there. Not all of us, but I wouldn't know what to look at, to be honest. So yeah, definitely the labor costs are extremely intensive. Um, and as you go on further, more time is involved with that watch. So hence higher per hour labor costs and more time involved with that watch. It's a labor of love. It's a labor of love. So what else can we say? Um, I think that I think that for many people, many of us, and possibly me included. Well, no, not exactly, because I've already pulled the trigger on a higher horological watch, like the FP Journe. That was my first step up, I think, right? I don't know if you'd exactly consider the Calatrava my higher horological watch, because it's such a simple movement in a watch. So I'm not sure, to be honest. That would be one to ask the crowd. What do you guys think? Do you guys consider a Patek 5196 Calatrava high horology? Is it? What makes that Patek Calatrava high horology? Because of the finishing, the quality, who made it, all of these things? Does the simplicity of the watch, the fact that it is a simple 240 manual mind movement with a simple seconds uh, complication, nothing but, does that in itself take away from it being high horology, the simplicity of the watch, or do all those things before mentioned do indeed reflect that it's higher horology? I'd love your opinions on that. Please make a comment in the video comments down below. Share what you think about that, because I personally, I'm not so sure. That'd be a great discussion to have. Now, I mean, can you compare a president day date? If you say that a 5196R Patek is high horology, you kind of would have to sort of, wouldn't you have to agree that a Rolex day date is high horology then? There's a lot of finish that goes in a day date now, isn't there? So this is actually a really good debatable thing here once we start getting into the things here, to talk about the things here. I do indeed believe you got to consider a day date high horology. No, I mean there's hand finishing in a day date. It's That's not just thrown on and off an assembly line now. So I guess there can be some variations here then when it comes to talking about Rolex and meteorite dials, and I mean there are watches. There are watches. You know, another and something else to consider that would be interesting. If you go back in time, if you go back in time, look, I'm going to throw something out here for you that maybe you've never considered. I'm trying to set this up because it's a good one, actually. And I'm thinking about my 1969 transitional Omega Speedmaster, that beauty, minted in April 1969, 2 days before the moon. You know, my my question is my Omega 1969 transitional, is that high horology? Are watches are certain particular vintage watches high horology? Because you have to think now, these were highly regarded luxury mechanical watches back then in the 1960s, and the lack of machinery, the lack of assembly lines and technological doohickeys that were available for watchmakers back then, they were a lot limited back then, right? They were a lot limited back then, especially considering that we were when we were going into the 70s, right? In the 70s, those watches there, uh, we lost a lot to disco and the quartz movement. So a lot of stuff got buried and hidden away and lost, right? Mechanical stuff. I mean, there was a lot of hand effort involved in those vintage older watches, like my 1969 Speedmaster. For instance, on my Speedmaster, in my particular year, for just a few thousand of the watches, um, when they switched from the 321 movement to the 861 movement, there was one part of the dial that didn't allow for the 861 to sit in the case where the 321 sat without any modification. There was one glitch, and that was the Omega applied metal logo that was on the dial. One of the pegs, one of the pins that comes from that Omega applied logo that sinks into the dial, that fits into the dial, one of the pins that sits into the dial, um, touches one of the parts of the 861 movement, and they needed to manually hand file that one peg down on every applied logo. So there's hand finishing, I wouldn't say finishing, but handwork involved in every transitional Omega Speedmaster from that year, from when they went to the 321 to the 861, making this watch very valuable and very rare because at some point Omega said, forget this, we're not doing this labor of love anymore. We're not filing down that pin. We're just going to start painting the Omega logo on there. And so the very first 861s, only very few of them had the applied metal logo and can be called transitional Speedmasters. The remaining portion of those made in the same year have painted dials on them, painted Omega logos on them, and they're not transitional Speedmasters, even though they're made in that same year, same reference, same model, same everything. That's the way you know the difference between a transitional Speedmaster and a non-transitional Speedmaster. And everybody labels them as transitionals, but they're not. Only the one with the applied metal logo is a transitional Speedmaster. So that being said, would you consider a watch like that high horology because of its creation or not? And I think some of these things would be debatable, you know? Is a vintage Daytona 6235, is it high horology? Was it back then? Was that movement, that particular chronograph, was it high horology back then? Was it a feat for the ages back in the 1960s? Was it an accomplishment? You might not think of it much now, but back then it might have been high horology. And I think you need to appreciate those things as such. Much like how many people in the watch community don't appreciate other people in the watch community. And I think that I think that's a good thing to think about. Vintage, quality vintage equals high horology. High horology maybe can also mean how much labor of love went into a piece. And I do think you have to consider the era in which it was made. I think that's important. And I don't think anybody has ever really brought that up or considered that as a variable in considering high horology. I think it's important. I think it's a good idea to talk about where that watch came from. Now stepping into modern time, stepping up to today, Rolex doesn't do much more than just their time only GMTs, date. I mean, they don't they have complications. Sky Dweller, they have complications, but what we all know and have come to understand is that there is no additional complications. They keep it simple, stupid. And that's part of the success of the reliability, the robustness of the watch, that they have become experts in the mechanical processes of the watches they do indeed have in their shelves, in their stock. They've professed them. They've professed them to, like a 99% reliability. You know what I mean? So there's no reason to go in other areas where they won't have a 99% reliability rate, which will take away effectively from the brand, which is known as the brand of reliability. Okay. So I think these are the reasons why you don't see any new complications, and you will never see any new complications from Rolex. I think over the last 18 months, you've heard people, including myself, have discussions. You know, is it time for Rolex to introduce a higher complication? Are they going to? I think it was all wishful thinking. I think it was all wishful thinking that that folks uh, were wanting Rolex to come up with something else. But that's all it is, folks. It's wishful thinking. It will never happen, and for all the reasons before mentioned. And I mean, they don't need to do it. They can't keep stock on shelves. They don't need to do it. Um, you know, will there come a point one day where Rolex runs out of ideas? I mean, only time will tell. You can only make so many variants of a day date, so many dials of a day date, so many variants of a Submariner, so many changes to one. Or can you? I mean, can you make changes forever on these same 7 models? I mean, can you make changes forever? Or at some point will they be forced to reckon with a new reference model because they just plumb run out of changes, iterations they can make? What will happen? I'm sorry there's no visuals to go along with this, but we're having a no, sorry, no visuals. Um, Now I guess I don't want to lead the discussion into, like going into the next segment of high horology. So you've got your Rolex watches now. We've discussed whether or not they're high horology, and I think there was some good thoughts in there. I think the Rolex owners can appreciate what was said. And I think the non-Rolex owners can also appreciate what was said, because I think that now you can talk about how Rolex bridges the gap to highest horology. And that would be, the level that I'm journeying into now. It takes a little longer to get to that journey because, like we mentioned before, the higher horological journey tends to naturally cost more money because of the parts, because of the cost per hour labor, and because of the extended number of hours of labor involved with that higher horological watch now. It's not because of demand, but it's because of the quality of the components, the cost per hour labor, and the extended hours of labor per hour that are needed and provided given to that watch. It has nothing to do with demand. Demand, the demand portion of the price is satisfied in the secondary market. So that's where you would attribute the demand. It's 5 o'clock. To the price correlation in if you're going to think of demand. Um, so now, you know at retail, we're talking that now, just naturally I have to come to a later part in my life when I can afford such a watch. So for most of us, the journey starts with either Rolex or something that costs less than Rolex, and it's simply only because of cost prohibitions. Um, you know, it's also to brand recognition too. I truly do not think that the majority of us get any of the higher horological brand recognition when we're younger, um, when we make less money, but in more particular, for more reason, when we don't own any watches. When you don't have any watches yet, you're I think for the most part you're definitely unaware of higher horological brands. Before I bought my first Rolex, I knew of Rolex, I knew of Omega, I knew of Cartier. I did not know of FP Journe. I did not know of Lange. I did not know of Richard Mille. I did not know of uh, a Breguet. Okay, I wasn't aware of all of these brands until after I owned a few Rolexes. Actually, I didn't care. I guess I look. It isn't that I didn't care. What is it? I just didn't know. Look, it's brand recognition. It's brand recognition. Brand recognition. So when you're not a watch person, and if you go talk to someone on the street, if you go talk to the street, what watches are they aware of? They know Omega. They they know Rolex. They know Omega and they know Rolex. Of course they know Cartier. Of course they know Cartier. You think they know Carl Vuitton? Louis Vuitton? Who? Louis Vuitton? Exactly. So literally, man, unless you can think of another brand, there's no way just the regular old normie non-watch folks know of any other brand out there other than Cartier, Omega, and Rolex. I mean, yeah, Swatch, Seiko, Casio. I'm not talking about those. We're talking about our watches. We're talking about our watches. They only know these, and you were probably the same, right? So was I. So Rolex is really a big stepping stone for us to get into this watch game. Omega too. So to this day, still, the Omega watch was my largest watch purchase that I have ever made. Still to this day. Um, do I have a picture of that watch? No, no, I do not. But to this day, that watch, it was my largest purchase by far. God, I love that watch. I don't know why I got rid of it. I'm looking for a picture of it. Don't think it's here. Um, what else? So continuing the discussion about stepping bridge, bridging step, bridging over, bridging forward, onward and upward. So this will be the end of this. This will be the final leg of the discussion here. So now that I'm uh some of us may never get to the stage of this higher horological journey that we're trying to get to. Like my YouTube channel says, uh, what I professed from the beginning on my channel. Let's go to that real quick. Let's check that out. Actually, how do I look at that? Oh, I don't know how to do it. What I said is that I'm on my come join me on my channel here as I go on my journey to achieve horological excellence, and I seek out my highest grail watch. Join me on my adventure. And that's what you all been doing here for a few years. Right. And I didn't know if I was going to get there, to be quite honest. I didn't know if I was going to get there. I'm 49. Um, you know, I'm trying to get back into the work environment. It's very hard, but you guys don't know everything I do behind the scenes, but I'm trying. I'm trying. But with the degenerative spine, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to have consistent days to where I can tell somebody I can commit to you to come in tomorrow because I can't. So it's very hard. And the thing is that, being cut down at age 46, um, my income, I lost my income, and my portfolio had gone down, I think about 90%. So I don't know. I think I lost damn near 70% of my net worth. Um, in the cryptocurrency, yeah. I lost about 70% of my net worth, I think, in the cryptocurrency. Because I'm a gambler, yeah. Hmm? Right? I once lost $27,000 playing Casino War against Harrah's in San Diego, huh? You know what Casino War is, right? High card wins. The dealer flips you a card. The dealer gets a card. Whoever gets high card wins. Yeah, yeah. So, so what I'm trying to say is that, man, I may have never reached my horological journey, huh? You never know what happens. You just go on the journey. At that point, 3, 4 years ago, I genuinely thought I was going to have to sell my entire watch collection, right? But fortunately, things changed, and things definitely changed, and everything came back up several fold. So now I'm in. Now I can re-engage in my watch collection journey, right? Some of us may never, some of us may never start, and it's only a dream. I don't know where everybody's at. I'm assuming most people are in their journey somewhat if they're watching this show, right? Uh, but that's where we are at. You're in your horological journey to watch excellence. Your own, everybody's on their own journey, huh? So, uh, so that being said, that's when a year ago I decided to pull the trigger on uh, the Havana Chronometra Sovereign, and I understand some of you may consider my Patek Philippe Calatrava my first horological watch, higher horology watch. That may be true. Be that as it may, put that aside. I'm really looking at my FP Journe as really being my first hot horology watch. In my mind, that's the real one, the real first one right there. And I definitely would consider this to be my grail piece, without a doubt. It will definitely be my most expensive piece by more than double the amount cost. And I do really think, though, that the blue Chronometra Sovereign, the what's it called? The Chronometra Blue. I do think the Chronometra Blue is truly my true grail. So I just want to put that out there on the table. There's no doubt that the Chronometra Blue is definitely my true holy grail, ultimate, because I went on an application to get that piece years ago. I think it's been 4 years now that I put that application in. And um and there's still about 4 years left to go. So just imagine that. That is truly a true holy grail, horological grail in my mind, a piece that I applied for 8 years in advance. Imagine that. 8 years in advance, I applied for this piece. And the truth of the matter is, I still don't know if I'll get it, only simply because it's still 4 years out and anything can happen between now and 4 years. Um, they've definitely assured me that I'd be getting it so long as it is still made to exist. And that was pretty much their exact words. As long as we're still making it, then then your turn will come up one day, rest assured. And but I couldn't wait that long. I couldn't wait 4 more years. I had to pull the trigger on a current piece. And it's so funny that I pulled a trigger on the exact same timepiece as the one I'm getting in 4 years from now, just with a different color variation on the dial. And that's literally the only difference, besides the metal being different, but it's very similar in color. But I think that just goes to reassure myself that I'm very fond of that particular brand, reference, dial, and everything about it, that I'm willing to spend that much money on two of the same watch. So, so I think that's where uh, Haute Horology comes around full circle. It's a journey. It's a journey that starts with your first. It's a journey that starts with my 10-year-old's world timer Casio olive drab that he has on his wrist right now. That's where the journey starts. And to him, high horology is Rolex. And to me, high horology now is, you know, FP Journe. And and I suppose that once I acquire FP Journe, I suppose that high horology uh, going forward would be, you know, Grubel Force and Carl and some of those other brands. You know, you always you always have to aspire to look beyond the suns and the stars. You know, so it's fun that way. It's good that there's makers of watches out there that go beyond our reach, so that they always keep the universe expanding in a horological sense. Otherwise, we'd be bored when we reach the moon, and where else would we go from there? All right. So, with that said, please give this video a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed the conversation regarding Rolex and high horology, and I wish you the best in your day. And hope the AD calls you with that watch you've been waiting for. All right. Be good. Have a good one.